right, you're welcome to read 1 Corinthians chapter 4 in its entirety, but I'm just going to focus on one verse, and it's verse 8. Already you have all you want. Already you have become rich. You have begun to reign, and that without us. What's going on here? Paul is in full flow, and he's not being nice. He's being church. He's being prophetic, and in this section, he's being ironic. He's being loving enough to wound. What's going on? Well, there were some in Corinth who had climbed the social ladder. And once they got to the top, they pull it away, they kick it away from behind them so no one else could follow. These were people who had climbed the ladder and now were living like kings, while Paul and the apostles were still crawling through the dirt, dodging stones and sleeping in borrowed clothes. And what does he say to them? He says, "You reign, but without us," meaning you've risen and you've forgotten where you came from. This isn't a random jab, it's a theological reckoning, because Paul knows something that we forget. The moment you separate your status from your solidarity, you've abandoned the cross. Paul is rebuking those who have risen in esteem, but now distance themselves from the messy, vulnerable, marginalized body of Christ. And that brings us to our group, the UKME Clergy in Oxford, or Diocese of Oxford. Some of us are still in the wilderness, and some of us have climbed the ladder and carved out spaces in the promised land. But here's the question that the text asks. What happens when we make it? What happens when we get the collar, the title, and a chair at the table? Do we stay connected? Or do we reign without us, without them? So let me name it gently, but truly. There are some who, having reached a place of influence, no longer see the need for UKME clergy networks or support groups, because maybe they're now too busy, or maybe too senior, or maybe too healed. But you see, support groups like the UKME Chapter are not pity parties. They are theological statements. They say we belong to one another. And when we withdraw from belonging, Paul says, be careful. You may have traded Christ for comfort. Because the gospel never stops being cruciform. It never stops being communal. And here's the crux. Paul doesn't shame them by stripping away their glory. There are those of us who perhaps are more comfortable. He's not stripping us of our glory, but he rebukes them by comparing them to his own foolishness. This is quite curious. He says, while you reign, we are the ones on display, like prisoners of war, dragging their cross through the streets. We are the ones who still show up, even when it costs. We're the ones who will still speak out against injustice, even when the price is invisibility. We're the ones who keep the door open, not because it's comfortable, but because someone kept it open for us. They don't kick away the ladder. So to be a UKME clergy person is not just to have a personal journey, it's to carry a collective one. That's why this group matters so much. Each of us in some way stands on the shoulders of migrants, elders, quiet saints, and tired warriors. We bear the scars and dreams not just of our own journeys, but of multiple generations. And that means we don't just owe our success to God, we owe it to one another. Friends, the Church of England is good at elevating each one of us one at a time. A bishop here, a canon there. But the gospel isn't about single stars. It's about constellations. It's about us. So if you've been raised, come back for those still climbing. If you're flourishing, don't forget the soil from which you've come from. If you've found safety, well, lend it to someone who's under fire. Because the church doesn't need more individual success stories. It needs a generation of fools for Christ who refuse to reign without each other. And Paul ends with a father's plea of all things. He says, I do not write this to shame you, but to admonish you as my beloved children. This isn't about guilt, it's about sharing grace. It's about remembering who we are and walking back towards one another with our arms and eyes wide open. Not ashamed of where we've come from, not afraid of where we're going, and never too dignified to kneel at the foot of the same old rugged cross.